what is going to happen to Kate if I die now? And the answer came back, don't worry, she'll be fine, it'll all be okay. I was walking there thinking, am I alive or am I dead? All of a sudden, I felt Kate become part of me. And in front of me was this number like an alarm clock. We were standing on a road. It was a slightly convex road of packed dirt, and along the sides were flowers and plants with muted pastel colors, and the colors disappeared. At that time, I could feel Kate's feelings. And then we started moving down this road again. And she said, Annie, I would rather stay here with you. So I said, nobody's going to come and get you. You have to go to them. My sister Kate, she was only a year older than I am. And she had been battling breast cancer for 10 years. And finally, when she came home, they put her on hospice, she came home to me. So she was in my house, but along with her came her two cats and her dog. And I had two cats. So I had a zoo at home and it was a bit chaotic. And the animals were fine for the first week. And then the cats got into a fight. And somehow I got involved in the fight and I was either bitten or scratched on my hand. And there was blood everywhere. I cleaned it up and then thought I was being smart. And I took some antibiotic that I had in the house. And within a minute, I was in anaphylaxis. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't see anything. And my sight was going. I couldn't put a coherent sentence together. And Katie was still pretty much okay at that point. So she quickly called a friend of hers who's an ICU nurse. And Aranel came skidding down and looked at me and said, you need the hospital now. This is bad. So I was taken to hospital. I don't remember much about getting into the hospital, just laying in the bed, and the nurse wanted to intubate me. She said, this is really, really bad. We're going to intubate you. And I said, no, let's just wait and see if the medications work. And she said, okay, but we're probably going to have to do it anyway. And then I was out. I was not aware of anything anymore. But I found myself looking down. So I'm in the hospital and I'm not aware of anything. I don't know whether I was unconscious or what the situation was. And I was suddenly in my living room at about ceiling height, but I couldn't see the rest of the house. It was like a gray, like a wet beach sand, gray, not threatening at all. And I was looking down on Katie sleeping in the bed, and her friend Aranel was sitting on the couch. And I remember thinking, why is Aranel sitting in a different place that she normally sits in? But as I'm looking at Katie, and Katie was sleeping, the thought was in my mind. The question was, what is going to happen to Kate if I die now? And I knew the question came from me, but it felt like it was from a bigger, it was more of a universal me. And the answer came back, don't worry, she'll be fine, it'll all be okay. The voice that I heard wasn't through my ears. It was just I knew the answer. But it came from, I can only say it as the everywhere. It wasn't a singular voice, it wasn't a male or female voice, it wasn't anything. It was just the everywhere answer said, no, that'll be fine. And then Kate and Aranel, that disappeared. And then all the animals, her cats and dog and my cats, were sitting, and I could see they were all looking up at me. And the same question grew, and it was, well, what's going to happen to them? Because we were both really concerned about keeping them together. And if I died, and Katie's going to die, then what would happen to animals? And the same answer came back again. And then they disappeared, and the faces of my 3 adult kids they were all looking up at me, all 3 of them. And the same question started, but halfway through the question forming, I remember feeling, I'm not ready to leave them yet. So the question didn't finish, and the answer never came back because I had somehow seemingly stopped that. And I'm not sure how many hours later it was. I was woken up and all the machines were quiet again and I wasn't intubated. And the nurse said to me, she said, everything's okay, you can go home, but throw that medication away because next time if you take it again, you probably won't survive it. So she said to me, you can get dressed and you can go home. And I got dressed and I walked out the door. I didn't know where I was in the hospital. And there was a male nurse standing outside. And I looked around not knowing how to get out. And he kind of looked at me a little weird. And he pointed to the exit sign. And I remember walking down that part of the hospital not wanting to touch anything. Not quite sure why, but not wanting to touch, to brush up against anything. And I found my way outside, and the front of the ER typically has got that wide driveway area. And I walked across there and I could see cars and I could see people talking, but I couldn't hear them. It was dead. It was totally silent. And the thought, I was walking there thinking, am I alive or am I dead? I didn't know because I was walking, I was there, I was seeing anything. How could I be dead? But I didn't feel alive. So I thought, okay, I'm going to test this. I'm going to have to touch something to see. And across that area was a narrow sidewalk with a brick building next to it. So I walked across to that and I thought, I'm going to touch the wall. And if my hand goes through, then I'm dead. So that was that thought. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, how am I going to feel about that? If my hand goes through, how am I going to feel? Am I going to be okay with that or not? So I was really a little nervous about touching the wall. And I did gently and then a little bit harder. My hand didn't go through the wall. But for a good, I don't know, 25 feet, I touched that wall all the way down the sidewalk. And then there was a signboard, the emergency signboard that was on two metal posts. And I thought, okay, I'm going to, and I could feel myself coming back to being alive again. I was, that feeling of being dead was going, but I was exhausted and I needed to lean up against something. But I didn't want to lean up against the pole if I was dead, because then I would fall through it and then people would laugh because I've fallen. And then I thought, well, if I'm dead, then people aren't going to see me. But I still felt the pole all the way down, and I laughed a little bit and I leaned up against the pole and then got my nephew to pick me up and take me home again. So that was very short, and there were no bright lights, there were no colors, there was no sound, there was nothing like that. It was just informational, confirmation that Katie and the animals and my kids would be okay, but I wasn't ready for it yet.
And what did you make of it after that experience? So this happens, you come back to life, and what did you think happened?
I didn't think. I didn't think, because all I knew is that my sister was home, she was in hospice, and I needed to be there for her. So I didn't spend time thinking about it at all. After the other things, it was shortly after that, maybe a week or so, that I had the experience of this, when Katie came into me. Well, let me start that one, because it all melds together. In that, Aranel had come in a few days later and she looked at me and she said, you need a break, go and have a shower, go and rest up, take a break. And her being an ICU nurse, I knew that Katie was 100% okay with her. Aranel could do everything and more than I could. So I was totally relaxed in taking the break. And I went to go and have a shower, and I'm standing in the shower, and all of a sudden I felt Kate become part of me. It was as if her whole body was inside and her soul was inside me. And it was weird. And at that same moment, I heard her saying, ha ha, sis, look what I can do. And I just got this big fright, because I know she's asleep in my living room. And there's no way something like this could happen. I'd never heard of it. So I jumped out the shower and just kind of got back to getting busy and didn't think about that either, because my concentration was all on Kate and making sure she's okay. When that happened the second time, about 3-4 days after that, the same thing happened. I could feel Katie becoming part of me. And I thought, okay, let me see if this is really true, if this is something. And I reached up to touch my hair, because her hair was coarser than mine. And as I did that, I felt that it was her hair. But I was also, so it's the both of us standing here, I'm feeling her hair. I was also outside in front of us looking at this. So I'm feeling my hair in this body, but that one, I could see myself doing it. So that happened, and then I told Aranel, who was much more into the spiritual understanding of things at that point, and she could see where I was, because I was sole caregiver for Katie day and night. There was nobody else. Aranel would come in maybe once a day for a couple of minutes, just check that everything was okay, but she had to work and life. So Aranel said to me, you're tired. You can tell Katie not to do that again. And when it happened the third time, as that happened, I stopped her and I said, no, I can't deal with this as well as taking care of you, so you have to stop. And that hasn't happened again. I wish it would now, but it hasn't happened again. But with the near death and that, life was hectic and not getting much more than 3-4 hours sleep a night and having to concentrate on Katie's well-being. I didn't have the time or the energy to think about it or process it. I kind of just put it away and left it for it all came out after the shared death experience. When that happened, that opened the floodgates to starting to be able to think about it.
So what happened then with the shared death experience?
Katie passed away just over a year and a bit ago now. She passed away end of January, a year ago. Aronel, we knew that Kate, hospice had put her on imminent, and she had been unresponsive for 2 days at this point. And Aronel, hospice was in maybe twice a day at that point, just to check on her and her meds and her status and so on. And then Aronel had come and stayed the night with me. She'd stayed with me, and we pretty much didn't sleep at all. Just waiting to take care of Kate, but also waiting, not wanting to miss her passing. And then at 7 o'clock in the morning, she got up and said she had to go home, get some sleep, and feed a cat and so on. So she bent over and she kissed Katie on the forehead and said, goodbye, I'll see you on the other side, or something like that. But she kissed Katie on her forehead. And I went and I let her out the door, locked the door, came back in. And Katie had a tear running out of her eye. And then the other one was pulled, her head was slightly to the side. And that stunned me in that she was still aware enough to know that she wouldn't see Aronel again. So I came and I sat on the couch thinking, okay, I just need to pull myself together because now I'm alone with my sister, who's my best friend, my partner in crime. I mean, we looked alike, we sounded alike, we were just so close. It was amazing. So I sat on the couch thinking I just need to pull myself together a little bit to be able to go on, because it's kind of scary being alone with your closest person and they're going to die. And as I sat on the couch, I had this absolute need to get up and be right next to Kate. It wasn't just a thought, it was, I have to get up, I cannot sit here. And end of January, it was still dark outside at 7 in the morning. But I got up, and you know, when you get off the couch, your vision is kind of towards the floor, you're all leaning forward. And in front of me was this number, like an alarm clock, like a big alarm clock numbers. 800. I don't know what that means. I don't know how to process that right now. So I'm going to put it away again. And I got up and I pulled a little office chair without a back closer to Katie's bed. And I put her railings down. And the bed was quite high. So I just put my head on the pillow next to her bed. And she's flat on her back. And I put my head on the pillow. And I found a song, a lullaby, an old African lullaby that my dad would sing to us when we were growing up, when we had to be soothed. And I found this just pouring, and I hadn't thought about this for many, many, many years. And this lullaby was pouring, but it was almost like a visual thing I could see pouring out of my mouth right into her ear, which is her ear was right next to my head. And I'm like, okay, and I don't know how long that went on for, but somewhere in there, I was aware that I was only visible from my shoulders up. And Kate was also the same. Even the top of her bed had disappeared into this gray mistiness again, the same as the NDE. And I wasn't surprised, and I wasn't negatively affected in any way. It was just something that was. And almost instantly, we were standing on a road. Now, the whole of my house had disappeared at that point. I could only see Kate and I from my head. And then that changed to us standing on this road. We didn't go to the road. There was no time in between. We were just standing on this road. Katie was to my right. And it was a slightly convex road of packed dirt. And along the sides were flowers and plants, as far as I could see, with muted pastel colors. And as a photographer, I looked and thought, that would take an amazing picture. That would be beautiful. And the colors disappeared. The flowers and plants didn't become see-through or outlines. I knew that they had color. I just wasn't being given the color anymore. And in that moment, I knew that was because my attention was supposed to be with Kate. It was like being there, but understanding with a different brain, this is why this is happening. At that time, I could feel Kate's feelings. I knew what she was thinking. I knew what she was feeling. I was not aware of our legs or our feet or any way of moving, and I didn't look at her. She didn't look at me. But I said to her, and it wasn't with a mouth saying, it was almost visual packets of information going across. And I said to her, no, don't worry. You can stand and there's no pain anymore. You can stand and walk and because she couldn't do that for about 8 months to a year. She couldn't walk without pain before. And out of my peripheral vision, I saw her bouncing, testing her feet. And then I could feel her whole being changed, like, wow, this is amazing. Okay, I'm okay with this. She can stand. And she was standing more upright. And then I said to her that what we have to do is, this road leads to a gate. We have to walk down this road to the gate. As I said that, my other brain was saying, how did I know that? I don't know that. But I know that. Okay, so we're going to walk to the gate. And for about a year before Katie died, when she was going through something emotional or she had to physically move, she would say, give me a minute. And there was always that, oh, take all the time you need, adjust whether it's emotionally or physically. So she said, give me a minute. And then we started moving down this road. Again, I don't know what I was wearing, what she was wearing. The color had gone. At that point, I couldn't see the gate at all. But we started moving down this road. And again, the movement wasn't walking, but it wasn't floating. It was something that wasn't important. So we moved down and we were communicating, but nothing specific. But we were communicating just gently. And every couple of minutes, she would say, give me a minute. And then after a while, we got to about what I perceived to be the halfway point. And she stopped, and I could feel that she was stopped solid. She didn't want to go any further. And she said, Annie, I would rather stay here with you. And I told her that I would obviously rather that she could stay with me, but that she cannot. We can't go back. We can't stay here. We can't go to the sides. She has to go forward to the gate. There's no other option. And along with that came an opportunity for me to again tell her how utterly important she'd been in my life and how it's been an amazing life with her in it, and the thank yous and the appreciation. And again, that was like a package of information. It wasn't words. I didn't look at her. It was just the knowledge was being taken from me and given to her. And she was again, give me a minute, give me a minute. And then after a while, we started walking again. I started being able to see the gate. Now, the gate had square pillars and a rounded top. And there were bars down so you could see through the gate. And I started noticing people behind the gate. And I knew who they were. So I said to Katie, look, there's mom, there's dad, and I named off some people that were there. And she again dug her feet in, and she didn't say anything, but I knew that she was concerned. She was very much a lady who was in charge of her life. So my response to that to her was, no, you don't have to worry, because I knew that she was worried that they were going to take her. And she didn't want to be taken. She wanted to go herself. If she had to go, she wanted to go herself. So I said to her, no, nobody's going to come and get you. You have to go to them. And she relaxed, and I felt her shoulders. I could feel a whole, physically, I could feel her relaxing and emotionally. And we walked a little bit further. And then I started naming out again some people. And she tipped her head and she looked sideways. And we got to about what I thought was 6 to 8 feet from this gate, and we stopped, and we were just looking at these people behind the gate, and I couldn't see them clearly because the gate was there. And again, I was very concentrated on Kate. And so I said to her, in order to open the gate, all you need to do is lift your hand like you do in a classroom. And in that moment again, I wondered how I knew that. So it was like there were two me's. It was me there and then me wondering how I knew that. But that's okay. And I said to her, before you do that, though, I need to take one step back. And that was another one of those, but not even a why, but just, okay, I know I have to, but I don't know how I know. So she said, okay, give me a minute. And I took a step back from her, but I told her that I would be staying with her all the time, that I was not going to leave her, but I just have to take the step back. And after a little while, we just stood there looking at this gate that was still closed, and she said, can I look at you one last time? And I said, yes, absolutely, you can. You can do that. And she was now a step in front of me, and she turned almost all the way around, and she looked at me, and I remember her blue eyes and her brown hair and her face, and she looked so healthy. She was like, wow, this is Katie back to where she should have been. I would say she was back to where she was about 8 years ago, where she still had cancer, but she was healthy. She was on top of it. And it was interesting that in that moment I had color back, but just in her. The color everywhere else was still not there for me, but I could see the color. So I was being shown that she's totally okay. But she didn't look at me very long. She quick, and I remember thinking, I wish she could have looked at me for longer, because I could have stood there for a long time with that. But she quickly turned back and looked at the gate and started looking through the gate again to try and see the people. And then she lifted up her hand, and that gate slid open, but it didn't slide past the gatepost. It disappeared into the gatepost. I remember thinking, well, that's interesting. And it disappeared into the gatepost. And all these people stood in front of us. I could see individuals, but it was like a minimalist painting, I think you call it. It's where the artist will take one little brush and paint it, and that's the body of somebody. And then a dot would be the head and whatever. And I couldn't see their features. I couldn't particularly see their eyes and their mouths or whatever. I knew there was different colors. They were all wearing different clothing and different colors, but again, the color was gone. I couldn't see it, but I knew there was color. But I also knew they were all looking at Kate. Not one of them, not my mom, my dad, friends, family. Nobody was looking at me. And in that moment, it was utterly beautiful, because I didn't feel left out. I didn't feel sad that they weren't looking at me. I was just extremely glad that they were all there just looking at Katie. It was all about Kate. And one of the things that was really striking was my nephew. He had died by suicide 2 years before. And he was right on the right-hand side of this gate. But he was the one that showed emotion. He was almost leaning forward, and his mouth was open in a big grin. And I could feel him going, there's Marnie Kate is coming again. I'm going to see her. And he was madly excited. He was the only one that showed emotion to me during that time. And I felt that as important as it is to share this experience, the fact that he had passed from suicide was really... Anyway, so Katie and I just stood, and I just remember soaking this in. And then she said, can I wave at you one more time? And I said, yes, of course you can. And she had this quirky little wave where her wrist would bend. So she lifted up her hand, because she's in front of me. And she lifted up her hand and she waved at me without turning around again. The color in her had gone again at this point. And as she put that left hand down, her right hand went out to greet everybody. And only when she stepped between those gateposts and she made connection, was there this most incredible... She was just seeing people that she never thought she would see again. And it was the most beautiful thing to see. I knew she was okay. I knew at that point that she was okay. And she never turned around again after that. She went across between the gateposts. They mingled. I could see her disappearing as she was greeting more people. What was interesting about that is the people that I knew, family and friends, and then there were a lot of people that I knew, but I didn't recognize them. As in, if you go to a crowded area and you see somebody, I know that person, I just don't know where from. There were a lot of those people there as well. So she kind of disappeared into the crowd of people. And then I noticed between the gateposts, I remember thinking, why is there hair on the ground? And that it would have to be one really long hair. It was just a wavy line between the gateposts. And then that split. And everything, the gateposts and everything behind that, just split and moved away slowly. And I remember thinking, it's like continents drifting apart. And that world just disappeared into mist. And I remember thinking that it's a very light blue mist, but I couldn't see the color. but it just disappeared slowly, and just the mist just, and it disappeared. The road just ended gently where the gates were. And right then I heard this voice from about up this to my right saying, "That was a job well done." It wasn't, again, it was like the voice in the NDE. It was not male or female. It wasn't from a singular being. I just felt it was coming from everything. It didn't surprise me because all the way it was just Katie and I on the road. I didn't feel watched. I didn't feel that there were people or a lack of people. It surprised me afterwards that I wasn't surprised at the voice because I hadn't been aware of anybody else. But that voice came, said, "That was a job well done." And then with Katie and everybody moved away, now gone, I found myself to the left of where the gate was, kind of like a road that has a car pull off. There was one of those, and I was now in that, watching a mist fogginess coming towards me, very gentle, and I remember just feeling relaxed, just watching this coming closer. And then it was all around me, and I was just being held upright. And I remember feeling very, very comfortable, very peaceful, but I didn't have that overwhelming love or overwhelming peace that others talk about. It just felt to me as if I was being put back together, as if I had been a puzzle, that the pieces had been moved away from each other, that there were gaps, and that I was being put back together, not being made different, nothing different, just being made whole. It was like a healing. And I just remember thinking it was extremely comfortable. And then I don't know how long that went on for. And then I was aware of a pop feeling. It wasn't a sound. It was much like in some of the sports things I've seen on TVs where they hold up this big piece of paper and the ball team comes running from the back and they bust through that's what it felt like, is I was busting through this something, and I was back in my living room, and my living room was back. I could hear my animals again, and it was light outside, and my head was still next to Katie on the bed, and I just lifted my eyes, looking around, thinking, okay, what just happened? And my eyes caught the clock up on the wall, and as I looked, that second hand ticked over to 8:42. It was 8:42 in the morning. And I looked at that, and I looked down at Katie, because at that instant I connected the 8, and I looked down at Katie, and I'm literally right at her, and her last breath went in my face. I'm in the moment, and I've just had this mind-blowing experience that I have no idea what happened. And I look, and there's my sister who's gone. So I didn't pay it attention because it was about Katie right then. And it was only 2 or 3 days later that it was like, okay, I can address this now and try and figure out what happened. So I didn't address the near-death experience or that soul walk in that I still don't quite have the right words for until that shared death was over and a couple of days had gone by.
Wow, I can
Yeah.
imagine. It's so I was tearing up there a bit, but I was thinking, based on what you've told me about your relationship with Katie, it almost seemed fitting, as you did so much in life together and you relied on each other so much, so you're partners for each other. It felt fitting that you would end it this way as well,
Together.
and you would
Yes.
be part of it. But I can't stop but think, usually we think of death as something sad, as something to regret. How did you process, so having had this experience, also knowing that Katie was ill, so she wasn't feeling her best, she wasn't doing well, how did you feel when you saw that she passed away?
It was like I'd lost my world. Just not having her here not having her here anymore it was, I think, one of the biggest shocks of my, well, it was a physical shock. But together with that came the knowledge that she's okay. So it kind of tempered that. I kind of thought about it the other day. I thought, it's like you stub your toe and you can see it's bleeding or it's off, it's been chopped off, but you don't feel the pain. Or you know that the pain's it's there, but you can't feel it. So it was very conflicting in a lot of ways that I felt I couldn't grieve like I felt that I should have before I had this experience. I mean, I've seen a lot of people in grief. I'd lost people, my mom and dad, and a lot of family members. So I knew how I should feel, but I knew it would be worse with Katie because we were that close. And yet I couldn't feel that because I knew she was okay. So it's been a conflicting, there's been a lot of conflict. I'm not happy she's gone. I'm happy she's okay. But it's hard to grieve somebody when you know they're okay. Kate was also, I know about maybe a week before she passed, we were having a conversation because we spoke about death and dying, and she said she wasn't afraid, but she had these little tells on her mouth that I knew she was nervous. And she said, well, if there's something, that'll be great. If there's nothing, she's not going to know about it. So she's okay with that. But in that conversation, she got quite tearful the one day, and she said, Annie, I feel like there's going to be two of us going. She didn't say two of us dying. She said two of us going. And I didn't pick up on that because the last 6 months of her life, I didn't talk about myself much to her other than, don't worry, I'll be okay. Don't worry about me. You just worry about you. So I didn't go into that any deeper. So she was aware, as I said, we were very close on many levels. So losing her was just beyond devastating, but it was at the same time, it's not because I know she's okay. So it's been a tough trying to figure out how to grieve a lot of the time. Yes, you understand the guilt. It's like I should be feeling terrible. I shouldn't be able to carry on with life. But, well, not in the way it was before because of this huge loss, but at the same time, they're okay. They're on some other fantastic adventure. I saw with my mom when my mom was passing, for a good month and a half before she would see my dad and her brother and other people, she would have full conversations with people that simply were not in the room. And it was, I knew it was them because I knew she would speak a different language to them. And I knew what she was saying, and I knew these were things that had happened. There was a lot of memory sharing. And then as she passed with her last breath, came out the words, Mama, as she passed. And so there's a lot of those things that I've seen with my mom and others that really didn't stick with me. But then the one thing that stuck with me now with Katie as well is that once she was over that gate, through the gate, she never turned around. And that thought was also one that I spent a time struggling with because she didn't need me anymore. But she didn't need me for the things that caused her pain. I was the one walking her through 10 years of cancer, whatevers. And she didn't need that anymore. So that was a happy thought. Whereas typically somebody who's leaving forever and not turning around would be almost hurtful. This was so there's so many conflicting thoughts going, the happy, the sad, the guilty, yeah, it's not easy sometimes. You know that.
Absolutely. And how did you sort of make sense of your life? Because I can imagine taking care of your sister also took a lot of your time, a lot of your energy. So all of a sudden you're in this grieving process, and also the thing keeping you busy, almost keeping you from thinking of your feelings, is also gone.
Well, that was hard, but in addition to that, about 6 years before Kate was diagnosed, my son was diagnosed with leukemia. So I had my son with leukemia, my mom with Alzheimer's, my sister with cancer. So for about 18 years, it's been about keeping other people alive or keeping them comfortable or cared for, whatever. With Kate passing, it was 18 years of me being one thing. So I had to try and find, this goes into a lot of where I am right now versus a year ago, is I didn't know who I was. My whole core family is gone. I don't have, my kids are further up north than, so, and being here, being taking care of Katie, I hadn't even created the friend circle along with the COVID years of not being able to do that. So I found myself incredibly isolated. So I just wore out my floor just by walking around and around and around and yelling. And slowly I've been able to come out because there has been so much connection with Katie since she died. It's been both stunning and peaceful. That slowly over the last 6-8 months, I've been able to find that I like having my feet here. I like being here, and I'm becoming more adventurous. I'm becoming more outgoing. I'm learning who I am, and I couldn't have done that when Katie was here and with. So I'm learning to be grateful, not that she's gone, but that I can try and find me. And that comes to one of the more powerful things that happened after she passed away. This one day I was particularly angry with her. I was furious with her because I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. I'd spent all my life doing, all my life, the last 18 years, taking care of people, and now all of that was gone, and I was lost, and I'm stomping, having a total hissy fit up my corridor, and I'm yelling at her loudly. And I said, how dare you do this? How dare you die on me and leave me alone? I mean, how can you do this? And I heard her sort of behind me, and I heard her voice, and I spun around at the same time thinking, has this all just been a nightmare, a dream? What is happening? Because she was so clearly behind me talking to me. And of course she wasn't there. But what she said was, no, Annie, remember last time you went first. Now it's your time to stay longer. Number one, how can she be talking to me? Okay. Number two, she never believed in reincarnation. So if I went first the last time, that means, number one, we'd been together in a life before, and the roles had been reversed. So that means reincarnation. And that's another thing that's helped me say, okay, I have to be present in this world to find my way. I have to find my way now. It was a job, whether it was with my son, who's fine. My mom, she saw her mom as she was dying, and Katie that I walked with. That was the jobs that I did were done.
Yeah, and then the job was finding out who you were.
Yes, and that's been an interesting ride. It's also been, because there's been so much contact. That wasn't the only time I've actually heard Kate talking to me. There was, I mean, it's trying to find me, who I am on a human in this world, and how much I want to try and find out about that world. And I'm finding for now, and it's, as I said, it's only been a year and a bit. For now, I'm trying to concentrate on finding myself here before I go and try and find out more about the other life. And I feel that because I'm here and I know that other life is there, I can take my happy time and just find my time and find out who I am, because that'll be there.
And do you feel sort of knowing that connection is almost there for you when you want it to be, and if you really need it to be, is it reassuring you when you feel lonely or you feel a bit lost as to what should you be doing next?
I don't know that, both yes and no, because it's not a major thing. I felt that there will be contact from whoever it is that's died. It's mostly come from Kate. I haven't felt it from my mom or dad particularly closely, but that will come when I need it, not when I want it. So, and that's what's happened all along, is that it will happen when it's needed. So if I don't get, if I'm lost, or if I feel I don't know which way to go, I don't particularly ask what they would do, because I know I have to figure it out here. I do find that in the times that I'm having a really hard time and I feel a little, as I say, wobbly, odd little things will happen. It's like I do sketches, and then my light will start flickering. And I can say, okay, Katie, if that's you, stop and start up again in a couple of minutes. And it'll do that. And then it's like, okay, this is okay. But it's not, I haven't found that, because so much has been happening. I've known that she's okay. I know that there's life after this, that I haven't really, after that one time of yelling at her, I haven't really felt that lost. It's just like I know the stuff. I don't quite know how to put the words to that.
No, I think we understand because it's sort of like something that you either feel or you don't, I think.
Yes, it's somebody said when I told them the story a couple of months ago, they said, "Okay, so now you believe that there's life after that experience." And I said, "No, I don't. I do not believe it. I don't hope it. I know it. It's not, it goes beyond that." And I think that it kind of feels a little isolating in a way because it's like I absolutely know it, no matter what anybody says. So it's not a belief because you believe in things you typically don't see or feel directly. So I don't believe and I don't hope. I know. So my life is different from people who believe in that or hope that there is something. There's it's an absolute knowledge. I've got legs, I've got feet, I've got a hand, and it's a different form of living from what I had before. All the things that happened to me since I was about 18, I've had experiences, and I've always just put them aside and not address them like the NDE and that sort of thing. It's just something that happened. I'll deal with it. Life's got busy, but now that this has happened and what's happened, all the communication afterwards, I recognize that I have lived my life knowing. I just didn't know that I knew. Now I know that I know.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've heard this before from somebody who said, listen, I wouldn't believe if this hadn't happened to me, but it's not that I believe, it's just that I know. I've been
Yeah,
there, I've seen it.
yeah,
So it's not whether I believe in it or not, it's, yeah.
yeah. It just is. It's a fact. The sky's there. You walk on the ground. It just is. It's yeah. There's no doubt, and it has changed how I look at every day, how I live life. I'm less not that I was ever afraid. I was afraid to lose Katie. It was scary to lose my mom and my dad, but it's different in that not that things don't matter, but that love and kindness matter more than anything. In that it doesn't, if before if I was afraid to drive somewhere. No, I'm not, because something happens, something happens. I know where I'm going. I don't know what it is, what to label it, because I didn't see beyond the gateposts and the people. I wasn't given an insight into that, but it's okay. So it has made things easier in a sense. Yeah, in a lot of ways it has.
I can imagine that for sure. And I will say, like, I also felt, I mean, I haven't had such experiences, but hearing it from so many people, it's almost like it relays that conviction, that this just is, like, this is just what happens. And
Yeah.
I feel so, I mean, often when people don't talk about that, but also like if somebody ever says something, I just would like to say to them, but it's gonna be fine. You shouldn't worry, because from what I'm hearing, it's not bad at all.
No, and that's the thing is it doesn't matter. Well, I'm not saying it doesn't matter what you do, but at the end of this life, you don't have a choice. There's a life after it. It's going to happen. So it's to me extremely comforting. And what's been interesting is that well, until I started the interviews, okay, I'm careful who I spoke to about it because I live in a small community. But occasionally I find somebody that I'm not, when I say not close to, but I know who they are, but we're not friendly, or we're friendly but not friends as such. And it happened just the other day. It's like the story just has to come out. And when that happens, the people listening to it, they either say right in the moment, or I get, whether it's an email or a phone call or next time I see them, they said, that really helped me because of this, this, and this. So it's interesting that sometimes people will ask about it and I'll give them the short little non-emotional version, or it just comes spilling out. And those are the people that say, okay, I needed that, or I needed to hear some, or whatever part of the story, whether it was general dying or whether it's a child that's committed, or somebody who's committed, who's died, is getting when I share it.
So on the topic that you've seen, I believe it was your nephew?
Yes.
that you've seen that committed suicide. What did seeing him there and seeing him being happy, what did that confirm for you?
It's always made me angry when people say if somebody dies by suicide that they're going to go to hell, because that's not fair to say to somebody who's grieving, number one. And now I know it's not true. And being given that, it's easier to share the near death and the shared death experiences and all the others because that's a wide audience. The audience that hears about somebody who's passed by suicide is much narrower. And Matthew was my nephew, but I don't feel that I have the I would like to just emphasize that if you know somebody who's died from suicide, they are okay. That is so important. And it didn't change my way of thinking. It confirmed my way of thinking.
That's exactly where I wanted to get to, because I know sometimes from religious perspectives, we are taught certain things, and I think a lot of the things we're taught, or the things that we're, have been told so many times, we end up saying them as well, or taking them as the truth. I think they're not always true.
Yeah.
And we never really question them, because if you've grown up and went through tens of years with a certain belief, then you would never really question it because it's part of you. And indeed, to me, it seems like the part of, that people are different if they have gone away by suicide. It seems like a man-made rule, to be honest, that something
Yes.
different happens to them. Just as if we say, well, if you've been divorced, or if, just it's just an arbitrary line.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
decides what makes somebody a good person or a bad person? We just
Yes.
draw a line in the sand and we say, oh, if you're divorced, then you go over to the bad people, and everybody who hasn't done that, you're a great person. And we can do that with blonde and brunette. We can do that with everything, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and again, when you talk about people being addressed, especially when somebody passed away and they're grieving, and also other people bringing this upon them to burden them even
Yeah.
further, it
Yeah.
seems unbelievable. So it's great that I have read some comments, and I know that part of our audience has had events like this happening, and I have heard in other interviews as well of people being in touch with family members that have passed away by suicide, also saying that they're okay.
Yeah.
So I believe the evidence is quite strong,
Well,
suggesting.
Well, yes, and just amongst the few people there, you had my nephew who died by suicide. You had my mom and dad who'd been divorced and remarried. Well, my dad had remarried, and my aunt who was an absolute non-believer in any religion. And there's a broad spectrum of people, and yet they were all there. They were all, and yeah, I it's taken away. I never really, I never believed in those lines we say we draw. If you do it this way, if you brunette or blonde, then you go to heaven or hell. That didn't make, but again, that all just confirmed it for me. That whole experience was just a confirmation.
Absolutely. And one of the beliefs that I'm getting more and more in the last period of time is that we're really nobody to judge, right? And to say this is good, this is bad.
That's
And
yeah,
whenever we feel ourselves having an opinion that's of the sort of, you're wrong for doing this, or I mean, we have it with politics all the time, right?
yes, yes,
Um,
yeah,
and it seems like we are not here to do that. We are not here to say, no, you're seeing things wrongly. We are just here to accept and be loving and supportive.
yeah,
And what I've learned to do is, if I feel myself in a situation where I cannot bring that part of me out, um, if it's not genuine, then it's not. But then
hmm
I will just remove myself from that situation, instead
yes.
of just being judgmental and saying, no, this isn't right, you shouldn't do it this way.
hmm And yes, that's the case. And also, if you get yourself into a situation where you become judgmental, doesn't mean you're not going to go somewhere fantastic afterwards. That's a human condition. We're here with human conditions, and it doesn't really matter if we slip up. I don't even think that it matters because we're here for when people say a learning experience. I think we're just here for the experience. So even the negative experiences, whether it comes from us or we're subjected to it, are part of why we're here. We have to learn that, whether it's something we created or was given, put upon us. So one other thing I wanted to say about that is listening to a lot of people with their NDEs and their other experiences. There are people who they've seen other beings and they've seen bright lights and they've heard music and they've all sorts of stuff. Because I wasn't shown any of that. I really strongly believe that we are given what we need, not what we want. So somebody who's grown up in a heavily religious, whichever one it is, situation might see a shared death experience vastly different from mine, but that's what I needed, not what I maybe wanted. I didn't even know I needed it, but yeah.
Yeah, it sounds to me, because when you were telling me the story, I was wondering, was that experience for you or was it for Katie? Who was it made for? And I couldn't figure it out. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it was, in the moment, it was absolutely 100% for Kate, because even when we were at that halfway mark and I was telling her again how important she was for me, I didn't get feedback from her. And I was also, when I came out of that, I was surprised that I wasn't, or I was surprised that I was able to say the things I said to her, like how much I'm going to miss and how much I loved her and how to do all that, without breaking down. How was I able to say that final goodbye without the emotion? How was I happy to not have my family look at me, but all look at Kate, to feel that the total joy that it was Kate, to her not turning around again. It was utterly not about me. That walk was all for Kate. I think the repercussion is there always an action and reaction. I think that has been something that I look on as an incredible gift, that I was able to do that with her. I remember watching my daughter giving birth, and obviously it was her child. So it wasn't for me, but having the privilege of watching that is a gift as much as this was a gift. And it's literally changed everything about how I think about things. It's confirmed that it's okay to think the way I did, but in a deeper knowing way. So in a sense, it was for both of us, but in the moment, it was utterly for her.
Beautiful. Annie, would you like people to get in touch with you? And if so, how can they find you?
Yes, I'm really open to that. I have a Gmail account. I have started writing these and a whole lot of other experiences down, but I don't have any website or anything at this point. So my Gmail is the one you've got, anniesSDE@gmail.com. And I love getting emails, and I'll answer every one of them. And if they've got a story to tell, I'm just super keen to hear it.